Hi, friend.
Hello, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm great.
Good, good. Let's see. Can you hear me okay?
I can
Maybe
hear
if I
you
pull the.
wonderfully.
Okay, cool. So you are interview number 4. We'll do a pre-show chat, and then when here, let me pause this. Oh, wait, don't do that. Cancel. Thank you so much for joining me today. For the record, state your name and what the name of your story is.
My name is Sarah Tufts, and the name of my story is Perseverance and Persistence in the Face of a Spectrum of Life Choices and Adversities.
Okay. All right. So your spectrum of situations, shall we say?
Yeah, sorry, summarize that.
What is your origin story? Where did you start?
So it's kind of crazy. My background, a little bit of background story here. I've grown up in a family business like my whole life, as long as I can remember. And with that experience, I've had the perspective of kind of growing up in a rich household, and also growing up in a very poor, and we're struggling to figure out where our next meal is coming from household. A lot of that didn't necessarily stem from the family business as much as it did my dad's addictive personalities. He has struggled with addiction most of his life. There were thousands of dollars spent on rehabs and all sorts of different therapies to try and help get him sober, and it never really stuck. And so throughout my childhood, he continued to use crack cocaine, and a lot of it was separated from the family. He would go on long drug binges where he would disappear for weeks on end, and my mom and I wouldn't know where he was or what had happened to him, and we would be calling morgues and hospitals looking for him, trying to figure out if he's even alive, and then he would just appear, and kind of act like nothing happened, went right back to business. He ran a very successful business while he was doing this, for most of the time. Sometimes it wasn't that successful, but a lot of the times he faked it, and nobody knew. He would be going into millionaires' houses and taking their money, tens of thousands of dollars, and they had no idea. I mean, he was very functional for an addict. Um, and he never got caught up for drug charges. Um, he skated for years. It was actually kind of ironic. The one thing that ended up catching up with him was traffic violations. He had a lot of just petty traffic stops and stuff like that he had blown off, and it caught up with him, and they took him in on a warrant for unpaid traffic fines, and he went in for 45 days. And in those 45 days, he was put on Wellbutrin. Um, and Wellbutrin, something about the medication itself, it kind of cuts off the addictive pathways in your brain temporarily.
Mhm.
And so that medication allowed him to get sober from crack, and he did. He never went back to it. But he clung to that idea of, well, I'm sober because I don't do the drug anymore. But when it comes to addiction, I've learned growing up with an addict as a parent that a lot more than just stopping the thing that you're addicted to. Um,
All of a sudden, I can't hear you.
oh, what part did I cut out on?
Oh, there you are. You're back.
Okay.
Okay. Might be the connection. I don't know.
One thing I learned growing up with an addict is that stopping the thing that you're addicted to isn't the only part of the healing process. Um, and so, even though he got off of crack, he proceeded to spend the next 15 years, because he's been sober for about 15 years now, chasing different addiction patterns and cycles. He has spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on tropical fish, imported from Africa, just chasing that high. He calls them his kids. He's bought a bunch of replica guns, just like blown all sorts of company money just buying replica guns that don't function, and it's just kind of a waste of money. And it's just one addictive pattern after another, and the root of the problem has not been dealt with. And so, growing up around those addictions, I have struggled with my own addictions as a result. And I, for years, was abusing alcohol. And I abused prescription pills when I was younger as a teenager. There was a couple of times where I had near-death experiences because I got really close to messing around and finding out. And I've had to struggle with dealing with my own addictive personalities and issues. And I know that just stopping the thing that you're addicted to isn't the end all be all of fixing the problem. There is shadow work and all sorts of areas of your psyche that you really have to bring up and figure out where the root of this problem is coming from. Because a lot of people don't do that. They just stop the drug, the alcohol, whatever it is, and then they say, "Well, I'm sober, I'm fixed," and you're not. There's so much more to it than that, because the addiction comes from void filling, and that
Yes.
void filling is a spiritual cause, in my opinion, more than anything. Because I've chased the mental health spectrum, I've gone through all the therapies, I've taken all the prescription drugs. My childhood, I was basically a science experiment. I mean, I was diagnosed multiple times with all sorts of different things that just never stuck. ADHD, bipolar, I forget what the other ones were, chronic depression and anxiety, things like that. And I didn't get an appropriate diagnosis until after I was 18. But while I was a minor, they were just throwing pills after pills after pills at the problem. And they weren't even legal prescriptions. They were sample bottles of pills that weren't legally allowed to be prescribed to me as a child.
Wow.
And during the course of the 2 3 years where I was being experimented on, I was between the ages of 7 to 10. And in that time frame, I had gained 150 pounds as a small child. Like, my skin stretched out so badly. I had purple stretch marks. Like, it was worse than any pregnancy you'd ever seen. And I wasn't even in puberty yet. I had seizures. I had extreme mood swings. I mean, I didn't even know what suicide was, and I was suicidal, talking about self harm and things. There were parts that weren't even a part of me that were brought out because of these drugs and the reactions that they had on my little child body. And it took years for me detoxing just to kind of recover from that. A lot of the side effects on those pills are type 2 diabetes later on in life, and seizures and all sorts of other things. So, I mean, it was a lot of experimentation. I don't think that there were really a lot of incentives for getting to the root of the problem and helping me with my situation. I think it was more of salespeople pushing something for some sales incentive, because I also have a background in sales. That's one thing that's helped me with my anxiety and my depression more than any pills or therapy is kind of exposure therapy, of just getting out there and facing the rejection and facing that big scary thing that's just making you feel like you're just going to jump out of your skin. And for the longest time, being around people and interacting with people like we are right now was that for me. I couldn't even go to a store. Going to a public store felt like I was just going to jump out of my skin and die right on the spot.
I can
Uh,
relate. I've been there. It's not fun.
no, it's not. And the more you give into that feeling, the worse it gets. The
Mhm.
more you say, "Well, I can't go out and do this because I feel this way," and you lean into that fear, the worse it gets over time and the harder it gets to really correct that pattern. So, pushing out of the comfort zone and doing the things that are uncomfortable and hard is where the growth comes from. It's how you recover and get better.
Yeah,
That's my
I think
personal
my
experience.
yeah, I would agree, because in my experience, when I am afraid of something or it gives me that anxiety, those butterflies in the stomach kind of feeling, that's what I go chase.
Yep,
Like, it's
exactly.
really hard when you first start because it's terrifying.
Mhm.
That feeling is that fight or flight and you just want to get out of there. But if you can just hold on and just face it a little bit at a time, that muscle gets stronger and stronger. And before you know it, you're chasing the things that really matter.
Absolutely. And the momentum of just pushing through it and keep going, the more you do it, the stronger it gets. And then you're just in the flow and it's this magical experience. You're like, how did I get here?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I love it. Okay, so you were an experiment, let's say. So when did you stop um looking to Western medicine for that help to fill that void?
When I had exhausted all efforts chasing the Western medicine dream, I
Okay.
had I had put over a decade into therapies and psychiatrists and pills and not pills and all the different things and the coping mechanisms, and it didn't get me anywhere. It kept me in the same trauma loop with the same trauma patterns where it was like, maybe I might get a band-aid, maybe it might help get me through, but it's not resolving the problem, and it's not lifting the weight off of me that slowly feels like it's crushing me, you know? And after I had exhausted all efforts and seen so many of my other friends and family and stuff also exhaust those efforts, because I've grown up around people who have gone through therapy and the traditional routes of things, and just to spend a bunch of money and not get anywhere. Um, and I'm like a big self-education person. I like searching for knowledge. So I knew that in my heart of hearts that there had to be something that we can do as individuals to help with our own healing and our own trauma, because it really is an individualized path. All
Right.
healing is not a standardized one size fits all thing. And to treat it like that is why we have a nation of addicts and people overdosing on fentanyl and just chasing all these void fillers, because the root of dealing with traumas is a personal relationship with those deep, dark personality parts that a lot of people aren't ready to face. And also to have a community that's there to support you facing those parts of yourself. Because I think that's another big part that isn't really often talked about in our modern society. We don't have a lot of community, especially community that's willing to sit there and make space for people that have heavy thoughts and emotions and paths and things like that. There's a lot of times where I've had local gatherings with some of my friends, and it turns into this community like group therapy thing almost, because they finally feel safe to talk about these things that society has shut them out on.
I agree. That's been my experience. So you've had these local meetups and they just kind of impromptu turn into
Yeah.
therapy? Yeah.
Yeah, I call them paint and puff. We just kind of sit around in my on my patio and we paint and talk and smoke our weed, you know. But yeah, they usually go out and they go partying and clubbing and drinking and stuff. And so like coming over to my house and having that experience is a different environment, and they
Sure.
feel comfortable to talk about those things. And I'm also a very vulnerable person. I don't shy away from my vulnerability. It's actually helped me with sales. So I like to share and express my perspective and where I've been through life, because it has helped me with my healing. And also, it's helped friends and family and stuff inspire them to talk about things that maybe they weren't comfortable talking about, but me talking about the things that I've talked about has inspired them to talk about them.
Right. Being vulnerable and being willing to share your story allows them that comfort that, hey, she shared this with me. I think I can share this with her.
Yep.
And really, I think a lot of healing starts when you're able to verbalize your story. You know, a lot of the trauma that we face is, stuff that we don't generally want to talk about in public company, the really tough stories. So you really have to be connected with someone that you trust to a certain degree. And then, opening up like that just really opens the floodgates, so to speak, for that healing to happen. So that's very cool. So let's see, we've got through your early childhood, and then as an adult, you said goodbye to Western medicine and you started looking at what kind of alternative therapies have really helped you or helped move the needle in the right direction for you.
So, what kind of fast tracked a lot of this for me was when I was about 17. Um, I had gotten to like rock bottom spiritually, mentally, physically, everything. I was just like, I'm tired of my life being the way that it is. I need a change. And the biggest root of that inspiration for change came from not wanting to have my anxiety and depression control me. And it inspired me to take a look at my diet and my lifestyle and assess that. And so I kind of went elimination diet mode and eliminated a lot of things that were making me sick and just messing me up. And I cut off a lot of outside distractions like TV, and even radio and stuff. I didn't want anything polluting my mind, because I wanted to get to the root of what my mind was. So I kind of went through a period of fasting from the external world. And it
Yes.
seems really radical and crazy, but I needed that. Um, and taking that period away from society and all the external noise allowed me to find the stillness within, to access my own inner voice. And that has done more to help me through my healing journey than anything else, because it has connected me to my intuition, and that gut instinct has been so helpful in covering my ass when otherwise I would be in a very dangerous situation. And throughout childhood and stuff like that, I was gaslit on a lot of things that made me suppress that intuition. And so getting that connection back has upgraded my life more than anything else that I could imagine.
I love that. Just sitting still and finding your own center.
Yes.
And you laugh and you say that it's so radical to go on a fast from all of those external stimulants, but that's really actually very brilliant.
Thank you.
So you mentioned your diet. You started assessing the things that you were consuming. So tell me what were you consuming when you were having all the anxiety, and then what changes did you make, and what have you stuck with?
So it's been a trial and error thing through the years, but back then I've grown up in a household where there's a lot of processed foods and stuff like that involved because of our background of being rich and poor, and being homeless at one point. We've kind of just eaten whatever's been put in front of us.
Right.
And that has its detriments. The longer you consume garbage food, the longer, or the worse the toll is on the body over time. And I didn't realize that because I had been eating processed foods for so long. So when I cut it off, I had basically gone to a whole foods diet. I just didn't know what it was called at the time. I was improvising. And so I was just eating fruits and vegetables, and meats, just basic foods, like nothing else, anything processed, like nope, not doing it. And I also fasted a lot back then when I was doing this. So I was either fasting or I was eating whole foods. And I just cut out all the processed foods and sugars and stuff. And that alone helped connect me to a lot of the energy centers in my body that had a lot of the stored traumas. Because once I made the diet change and started exercising and incorporating movements and stuff, I had actual trauma releases of things that I wasn't conscious of that were a problem. But when I went through that movement, it brought up all these things mentally and deep, viscerally inside of me, like, here, this is what you've been carrying around, let's release it now. And I was just blown away because I've never consciously thought about that being an issue.
Yeah. So it's a real thing that when we're going through trauma, our bodies are so focused on keeping us alive that we don't have the processing power to actually feel the emotions that are coming through. So our body, in its infinite wisdom, tucks those things away, so that you can deal with it when you're in a safe space. But oftentimes what happens is, as humans, we're not going back and visiting those things, or we're not making those changes like you have. So when you say that you have these trauma releases, what does that mean? Like, you're working out and all of a sudden you're super sad, or you get
Yeah.
super angry?
So I was doing a mix of like yoga and stretching and stuff like that, and kind of like dance as well. And I think it was a combination of that intuitive movement that I was doing that kind of triggered that energetic response in my body, because it was a deep emotional reaction of sadness or anger or guilt or things like that. But some of it was also accompanied by actual visual memories that I had not remembered up until that point.
Wow. So you literally had the emotions, but you also had a flashback, so to speak.
Yes.
Okay. And so when you're looking at these as an older you and you're seeing these memories, what are your thoughts?
A lot of it was that helpless child not having an adult there to advocate for them. And ironically, that same pain and trauma has been what has built me up to the adult that I am. And I actually feel really proud of myself, because if I see a child in distress or something, I'm I'm right there. There's no bystander effect here with me.
Right. You're willing
And
to jump in.
that I feel like does a lot to honor and help heal my inner child, being the adult that I needed back then that wasn't there, and just being a conscious human. When you see something, don't just look the other way. You know, just because you think that it doesn't affect you doesn't mean that it doesn't, because this is all a butterfly effect, and every little thing does affect the bigger whole.
Right. Right. I love that. I love that you're willing to step in and put yourself out there and say, hey, I see this little kid having a hard time, and I'm going to show them that, there's adults that care.
Oh yeah, and I've been like that for adults too. Don't think that I'm just discriminating and only helping kids. I,
Sure.
I see the inner child in adults just older than me too sometimes. So
Right. Right. I love it. Okay. So you started, having all these experiences where you're processing these emotions and you're getting this trauma out of your system. When did you realize that, you had really chosen an intentional but a good path for yourself?
when I was able to overcome addictions on my own and break free of cycles that a lot of other people struggle with even after going through traditional therapies and stuff like that. I have been a full-blown alcoholic. I've quit alcohol. I was heavily abusing opiates in the form of prescription pills back when I was a teenager. I quit that. Um, I destroyed my lungs for years with cigarettes, like chronically smoking, and I've quit that. I'm in the process of doing a break detox from weed just to prove to myself that I can. I regularly fast to prove that food doesn't have that addictive hold over me. It's just a lifestyle of facing the things that we are addicted to and breaking those cycles. The biggest cycle that I have right now that I need to break is this one. And I'm tempted to lock it in a safe for a month just to prove that I can. So,
Right. Yeah. Electronics are definitely hard to get away from,
yes,
especially in a society where everything is based on them. So I
yeah.
get it. I too have that interest in tackling those things that I'm addicted to. For example, uh, all my childhood, I used to bite my nails, and then when I was 18, I decided that was gross, and so I quit. And
Yep.
I just quit, and having that experience showed me that I would be able to address anything. So eventually I quit smoking the cigarettes because I didn't like being controlled and having to go spend my break smoking a cigarette, and I've been cigarette free for 16, 17 years now. My most recent addiction that I quit was stimulants. So I
Oh
got
yeah.
away from drinking coffee every day. That's such a standard American practice. When I tell people I don't really drink coffee, it blows their mind. And I'm to the point now where I can enjoy a cup of coffee, but I definitely don't need it. My day starts with water.
That's exactly how I am. I was like going crazy on caffeine to the point where it was making my anxiety so much worse. And I started to associate the stress response with the stimulants and what they do to our stress response. And I realized, if I'm going to heal my nervous system, I have to cut off the things that are kind of preventing me from doing that. And stimulants, caffeine, that's one of them.
Absolutely. And it's so rough on your gut too.
Yeah.
You talked about trusting your gut and your intuition and all that stuff. That's really a real thing. If your microbiome is messed up, you're not going to be making the best decisions because you're not going to be in the best state of mind. So, taking a break from all of that stuff and really healing and eating those whole foods and fasting like you have, you did all the right moves, and this was all intuitively. So that's wonderful. Like you said, you sat down and you got centered and you listened to your own intuition. It told you to move. It told you to eat these foods. It told you to, fast from the foods, break all these different addictions just by listening to yourself. That's a beautiful thing.
Thank you. Like I said, I didn't really have any adults back then to really guide me. And so I take it as my spirit kind of taking over and going, okay, well, no one else is going to intervene. So no one's coming to save you, Toots. You got to do it.
Right. Right. Have you had any of those moments where that old lifestyle or those old addictive tendencies have called to you and
Have
really tried to,
resurfaced? Yes.
yeah.
In 2020, when the pandemic happened, I actually went back to cigarettes. I never fully quit. I got off of cigarettes themselves, but I was vaping. And so I was still on nicotine. And the stress of the pandemic and everything made me go back to it. And I'm looking back, I know that that was because I used a crutch and I didn't actually rip the band aid off. Had I ripped the band aid off like I did now, where I've fully quit everything, all nicotine, I wouldn't have gone back and caved under the pressure of the stress. Because now I have the perspective of knowing that the nicotine was making my stress response worse. It was giving me the instant gratification mentally of it's making it better, but it was actually making my stress response worse.
Right. Right. So since you've walked away from using Western medicine as your primary go-to, have you checked in with Western medicine at all? Do you go have checkups? Do you get your lab work done? Is there any sort of touch of Western medicine in your world?
So I'm actually going to be going and getting full lab work done because I do want to see where my levels are at with everything, just to see if there's anything I need to like focus on. But I used to be chronically sick. I used to have chronic lung infections, especially growing up because I was around cigarette smokers. And I mean, every winter and fall, I would be getting bronchitis and borderline pneumonia. In 2018, I got taken down with pneumonia and hospitalized. I almost died from it, and my lungs were pretty rough from that. So I went the traditional medicine route of trying to fix that, and none of the doctors that I went to could help me with the post pneumonia issues that I had. And recently, at the beginning of this year, I learned about mullein, and I got a mullein tincture and started using that. And all of the heaviness and really bad stuff in my lungs that has prevented me from being able to take those deep breaths started coming up. Mullein is like the best natural expectorant out there, and I will preach it until the day I die because nothing Western medicine has offered could help my lungs, but this simple little plant tincture did. And I tell
Awesome.
my dad, who has COPD, I had an hour-long phone call with one of my online friends. She and her mother both have COPD, and she's like, I want to get my lungs back. I'm tired of this. What do I do? And, mullein, it is amazing.
I love it. I love it. I love the natural solutions and that, once you find something that works, you usually are put in contact with other people who need it.
Yep.
That's just kind of how it works out,
Pass it
right?
along.
That's awesome. So, who's really been there to help you integrate these choices into your life? Like, who helped you make these transitions from being a child who really didn't have all the support to the adult who is ready to support others?
So I've had teachers throughout life. I like to look at people, even the people that have done me wrong as teachers. And I haven't really had a whole lot of support in integrating the healed parts of myself. A lot of this has been a personal, individual journey. But I've had some support in the form of my sister and other people in my life. And I appreciate them. But at the end of the day, like the biggest support has come from within. Getting over that self doubt and that self hate and cultivating self love has gone a lot further than anybody telling me they love me or telling me they support me, because the true love and support comes from within. And when you have that foundation, you can build real community and real relationships from there.
Right. When did you feel like you had mastered that integration and you were able to hold space for others? Was there a moment, or was there a experience, or was it more gradual?
So I don't really feel like I've mastered it. I think that I'm still learning, definitely. But taking that lifelong student approach, I think diffuses people and their skepticism and allows them to trust you a little bit more, because students are open and willing to look at things from a new perspective. And sometimes that's how you find the answers to problems and solutions that we haven't been able to figure out the solution to for years or decades. And having that fresh perspective is refreshing for a lot of people that are used to standardized perspectives. That is just some regurgitated thing that you heard from some talking point or whatever,
Right. Top down authority.
Yeah, having those outside opinions and different angles of looking at things kind of sparks that creative thought in people that allows them to look at their traumas in new ways and allows them to feel comfortable enough to talk about those things.
I really like that you said that you look at everyone as a teacher. I do the same thing. Every experience that we have is there to teach us something, and it's really your perspective that's going to give it the value in your own world. So that's very cool. So what do you have going on in your world now? Like now that you're feeling more balanced and you're able to process your traumas and you're not giving into those addictions, what does your life look like now?
Well, this last year has been about tapping back into my dreams, both in the physical and metaphorical sense. My childhood didn't really have a lot of room for me to be able to dream. I had to grow up very young. I had to take on a lot of responsibilities and care for a lot of things that most children don't have to. And so my dreams kind of got put on the back burner, my creativity and all of that. And so this year has been about branching outside of that self doubt and getting back into my creative roots. I've been getting back into painting and jewelry making. I'm starting up crocheting. I've got a little sauce making hobby thing going on that I'm doing. I've been building and networking with my community, neighbors, local friends in my online community. I've been meeting up with different pocket friends and just trying to do all the things that I wanted to do when I was younger, but I had to be responsible, so I didn't have the time to do that. And now that I know as an adult with the perspective that I have, I can do both, I've been balancing both. And so I've been doing all of these eclectic things, chasing my dreams while also trying to help my sister manage the family business that she now runs, because she runs the family business that I used to run. So it's a very interesting life, but I wouldn't change it for anything because it provides me a lot of opportunities to experience a lot of unique perspectives.
Love it. I love it. So let's see. We're about a half hour in. What do you want to talk about moving forward?
I think that it's important to, for every person, to at least somewhat dip your toes into what the word shadow work means, or the term shadow work, because I've run into a lot of people online that think that it's demonic or scary or whatever.
Okay, so tell the listeners then, what is it that we mean when we talk about doing shadow work?
There is a duality to this life and to each and every person. There's the light and there's the dark. Every single person, no matter how good and pretty they prop themselves up to be, we all have that mix. And when you prop yourself up on this pedestal of all light and you basically play hide and seek from your shadow, your unresolved, repressed parts of your psyche, those areas will still chase you throughout life. And eventually it will consume you until you integrate and deal with them. And shadow work is just about facing those dark, repressed, and shunned parts of yourself and integrating them in a healthy way and healing from them so that way they don't chase you like my dad and his constant addiction cycle that still chases him to this day as a 70-year-old man. These problems will keep resurfacing if you don't find the root of them and deal with them.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, my personal experience, I kept living the same relationship over and over again because of an instance that happened when I was, 12, 13 years old. And I pretended that it didn't happen. And lo and behold, that chaos kept showing up in my life. And it wasn't until I stopped with the help of a good therapist and revisited, why I kept getting so sensitive over certain topics, and digging into that. Why does that trigger me? Why do I instantly get defensive? And really going in and figuring that out. And I uncovered a memory that I had purposefully repressed, and that memory, once I was able to sit with it and actually feel the emotions and think all of the thoughts, it wasn't my fault that this trauma happened to me, but it is my responsibility to address it, and once I really sat with all those feelings and got it all the way through, cried until there were no more tears, screamed until my throat was raw, did it go away? And now I don't have to continue to find that relationship over and over again. I am open to the best relationship of my life because I cleared away all of that gunk, and I can see those red flags a mile away and I'm just not going to deal with it. I'm just going to pivot and take a different course, but if you really don't go back and feel all of those things all the way through, it's just going to keep showing up. Like you said, for your dad, he's in his 70s now and he's still chasing, trying to fill that void with these various addictions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've even experienced it with my mom during my spiritual process when I was 17, when I was trying to get a control of my anxiety and everything. I was asking my mom really personal questions as well, trying to get to the bottom of some of the things that she has gone through throughout life. And I asked her a question that I wasn't sure how I was going to go over. I thought it was going to offend her and just cause her to react. But I asked her, I was like, Mom, how did you go from being like a goody goody Catholic girl to kind of being promiscuous and doing all these things? Because she told me a lot of things growing up where I'm just like, whoa. And she didn't react. She thought about it and she came back to me and she's like, I think it probably stems from when I was a young teenager, and going to church with my family, and our pastor was going around and feeling up all the girls, and they tried telling their parents, and their parents gaslit them about it. And that supplanted the idea that being promiscuous is okay, because something like that was a clear boundary that they were trying to express, and instead of being backed up by their parents, they were told, no, that's fine, that's normal.
Right. Right. And so
Yeah,
she
and that
just,
manifested as promiscuity and just like dangerous choices and stuff, because you don't know what's normal if your example of normal is not normal or healthy.
right. And she did the right thing. She went to the adults and they were just, nope, it's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine if that happens. So I
And
guess
lo and
that's
behold,
fine.
I looked him up too, the pastor, and lo and behold, he had molested over 100 different kids in Southern California and been moved around to different churches and stuff throughout the area. So, I mean, it is a chronic pattern. And a lot of the people that I've known throughout the years who have had like a really overly sexually promiscuous life, that stems from some type of trauma early on. And a lot of that stems from the Catholic Church and the things that they were allowed to do for many, many years.
Yeah, it's definitely unfortunate. It sounds like your mom was able to look at some of her own trauma. And I sincerely hope she's made progress in processing those feelings.
Yes, she definitely has. She's taken a lot of time to really reflect on things and not react emotionally, because when you react, you don't really heal. Really sitting there and taking the time to think about why you're reacting is where the root of the healing comes from.
Right. So every time you're triggered, if your first response is to just lash out, that's definitely something you should be looking deeper into, because when you are healed, instead of reacting, you actually have the opportunity to respond.
Yep.
And sometimes that response is not engaging at all and just walking away. I think that's a nod to all of the online culture that we have, where everybody's so reactive and emotional and not able to keep their cool. Hey, friends, maybe you should go look at that a little bit deeper.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Right on. So, when you think of these other people that you're meeting that need some processing, how do you approach that with them? Do you just say, "Hey, friend, you need some therapy," or is there more tact involved?
So I have never gotten good results going that approach. It's more of a leading by example, talking about my struggles and the things that I've overcome. Just talking about my alcoholism and what I've done with alcohol, how I've treated it, and how I look at it now, and how I've stepped away from it. That has done a lot to inspire people close to me to reassess their relationship with alcohol, because they're like, well, this person's admitting that it's a void filling tactic. Maybe I've been lying to myself and I'm also using it as a void filling tactic. So where do we go from here once we acknowledge that yes, you are using it as a void filling tactic? And it's getting them to that point of acknowledging it, then we can assess, okay, well, let's look at different options on how we can get to the root of what caused you to need that void filler in the first place.
I love it. Leading by example and holding their hand and just being willing to hold that space is huge for people. Like you said earlier, we don't have a whole lot of community built into our existences anymore. I mean, church used to be huge for a lot of people. There used to be like community centers, even like the local festivals, harvest festivals and things like that used to be a real time to gather and be with people. But in our world now, everybody can work remotely from home. We don't even see each other at the office half the time.
Oh, yeah.
So, it really takes that intention of building community like you have with your paint and puff. I love that idea, by the way.
Thank you.
So, how do you get people to participate in those kinds of things?
So, I kind of I'm very open on my social media about my life and what I do. I'm always posting about the things that I create. So, when I make new paintings, I'm posting about that. And a lot of my local friends will see that and they'll hit me up and be like, well, when are we going to do something like that? And if enough of them are hitting me up, I'm just like, okay, let's plan a night. And it's usually a weeknight. And we all come over and I've got the host space set up. So we just sit out on my porch like a bunch of old people and we paint and we talk. I'm thinking about turning it into a podcast, honestly. There's a lot of good content there.
I love it. I love it. There's a podcast for everything, right?
Yeah.
Right on. So what do you have moving forward? What's your life look like moving forward?
Moving forward, my biggest goal is to start a family. That's why I've been doing a very heavy detox protocol this last year. I'm trying to get my body, my mind, and my spirit to a point where I can have children. Because having a family, having a healthy family, is something that I think is the best, biggest, most ambitious goal that I could think of. I have other goals. I have a podcast in the works that I'm doing. I sell my paintings and my jewelry and stuff like that. I've got a lot of ideas and stuff bouncing around in my head, but the biggest goal is starting a family, and I hope to be able to start that process in the next year or so.
I love that for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So sounds like you're in a good, stable relationship now. How does that compare to what you witnessed as a child?
Uh, it's a lot of it has to do with reflecting on your part in the overall relationship because when I was growing up, there was no accountability for either side. It was just pointing the finger and blaming and deflecting, and there's no growth from that there, and you can't really have a functional relationship like that. You have to be very vulnerable and very accountable when you mess up. And if you're going to lie to yourself, then you're going to lie to your partner about that, and you're not going to be able to get very far as a couple. One of the things that I've learned over the years is that we're human and we're going to mess up, we're going to make mistakes, we're going to overstep boundaries and just be silly. But as long as you can be accountable for that and own it and be able to talk about that with the person that you've wronged or made mistakes with or whatever, there's growth and healing in that. But if you can't be accountable and acknowledge what you've done, then there is no relationship that can continue. I've had to distance myself from my dad because there's no accountability on his part. He has 10 kids and he has a strained relationship with every single one of them, and we are all the problem, not him. And you can't have relationships like that. You just can't.
Yeah, it's definitely unhealthy. And when you try to engage with someone who's exhibiting that behavior over time, it starts to take a toll on your own mental health. So good job for choosing you in that situation. I'm sure that's not easy. It's especially when it's our parents, it's like, I'm still going to love them, but I'm going to keep this strong boundary, and I'm sorry, not sorry if that's hard for them.
Yep,
Right.
absolutely.
So cool. So you're looking forward to having a family. You're doing this huge detox in order to get your body, mind, and spirit ready. How are you going to, what kind of community are you creating to support yourself with that family idea in mind?
A community that values children and the protecting of children above all else, because I think that that's the foundation for a healthy society. If you don't value and protect children, then you can't have a healthy society, because all of those abused children will grow up to be adults that need healing. And if you don't have the foundation for that, then you have a society of a lot of broken people. And that's what I see in the world today. So I think that it's important to have a community that understands how important it is to protect and value children and provide them with an environment for them to reach their full potential. So that way we don't have to keep repeating the cycle of healing broken adults. Because it's so much easier to raise awesome little humans than what it is to fix an adult that has been messed up through preventable things, easily preventable things.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely a lot of trauma out there that we can't control, but there is a lot of trauma that we can not inflict.
Yes.
Absolutely. Very
and having
cool.
a community that's willing to talk about uncomfortable things is how you work through a lot of those things, because a lot of previous generations, there's taboo topics about these subjects that just don't get touched, and that's why the cycles continue. So
yeah, I definitely can relate to that, because if you bring up something sensitive, it's, oh, let's not talk about that. Here's a beer. Let's forget our troubles. It's fine. Just, send them off into the void. Let it get bigger. Right. Very cool. All right. So what is this podcast that you're looking at creating?
So my podcast, the name is Astro Thots, and it's kind of silly. A friend helped me come up with the name, but it's going to be very eclectic, like I am. It's going to feature a lot of different things, from medical and lifestyle to philosophy and politics. There's going to be spirituality, creativity, and all those little tidbits in there. Probably a decent amount of conspiracy theorist topics. That's just the vibe for our gang.
Hey, I'm just going to throw it out there. It's not so much a conspiracy theorist as a pattern recognition specialist.
Yes, and my background with my grandfathers and stuff is kind of what inspires that part of my personality.
Tell me more about your grandpas then.
So on my dad's side, and this kind of what stems from his addiction cycle. My grandfather was top military. He worked his way up from an army grunt into the intelligence community before the CIA was a thing. His birthday is July 4th, 1900. He graduated from West Point with the top of his honors. He actually pulled rank and got my dad out of life in prison for some kingpin things that my dad was doing in the 70s. And my dad thought it was just a stroke of luck, but it was actually my grandfather and his connections getting him out of something that would have made it to where I'm not even alive and here today. JFK had sent him to Vietnam to assess the war, because he had also been sent to Japan before Pearl Harbor. So his background was intelligence gathering. And when he came back, JFK was dead, and he abruptly left his military career. And 30 years, Nixon tried to coach him out of retirement, and he said no. 30 years later, he died, and military top brass showed up at my grandmother's house and cleared out his office for like 2 weeks. Like, they were combing through it. From what I've been told by various different family members that were connected, he had a higher military clearance than the president himself. And he also pulled rank to get my dad out of being drafted in Vietnam, because he told my dad it was a, quote, politician's war, and he would become cannon fodder.
Wow, that is remarkable. So he was up there doing big things before the CIA was even a thing.
Yes.
That's unreal. So how did that play into your dad's addiction issues?
My dad was an only child. He was adopted in a military adoption, and they babied him and coddled him and protected him throughout his entire life. So much so to his detriment, because he was not able to really function on his own outside of that coddling and protectance. He lived in the good old times of Southern California in the 60s. So it was all the abundance and everything that came with that, and none of the gratitude or the discipline that comes with keeping it and sustaining it. And so all of that abundance led to the party scene, and the party scene led to people pleasing, and next thing he knew, he had a full-blown addiction.
Yeah, I see how that works out. That's unfortunate, for sure. I'm sorry that you've had to deal with that struggle, but I'm so grateful that you've been here to share your story with us. and, help encourage people to address their trauma and work through their addictions and really just take a moment to center themselves and find that inner voice. I think that piece of advice is so valuable for so many people. So thank you very much for that. Moving forward, if people want to reach out and connect with you, how can they get in touch with you?
So you can find me on Facebook as Svetlana Petrov. That's my Facebook account. I have a Patreon for Astro Thots and a YouTube channel. We haven't posted really anything yet, but I should have my first episode up before the end of October. That's the goal here. So keep an eye out for that. I will probably also be launching an Instagram account for the page as well. So that's
Awesome.
a good way to contact me.
Lots of way to get to you through social media. So I appreciate that. Are there any other thoughts or opinions you'd like to share before we close out today?
For all the lone wolves out there that are used to suffering in silence, it gets better, but you have to be vulnerable and you have to open up to your people, even if you don't necessarily know who your people are. If you never open up, you're never going to find them. So let a little bit of that openness in, and you might be surprised what it'll get you.
I love it. Wise words. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and we will be looking forward to your Astro Thoughts.
Thank you, Stephanie.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.